So I would say quick hello and thanks for joining me again for another live Q&A session. My name's Jean and I coordinate the marketing here at John Packer. I can't believe this is actually now my 4th event and we've already got a very exciting 5th lined up. If this is the first time that you've watched, then a very warm welcome to my home in Taunton. And you can actually catch up with all our previous sessions on our John Packer YouTube page and also our Facebook page. So far, I've had the privilege to speak to Yamaha artists Matilda Lloyd and Rob Burton, the legend Dennis Wick, and tonight I'm speaking with a professional buffet clarinet artist and college music professor Andrew Marriner, live from his home in London. Tonight should be streaming live to Facebook, and whether you're watching in on Zoom or on Facebook, it would be great if you could just let me know that you can hear me okay with a raised hand or a yes. I'm gonna wait for some raised hands on Zoom. Yep, looking good, that's great. As you can imagine, we've had lots of varied questions sent in, but do feel free to ask any more via the questions function in the toolbar at the bottom of Zoom or on Facebook. I will be monitoring questions and I'll squeeze what I can in. Now, a quick favour, if you are watching on Facebook and you have any friends that you think should be watching, it would be great if you could just do a quick share that we're live. Tonight's event is going to be really inspiring for clarinetists. Tips for finding the best mouthpiece and clarinet, how to improve technique, tone, and not to mention interesting or dull stories about reeds. I'm joking. Obviously, if you're watching, you want all the detail. Reeds are not dull. So I'm really delighted that I'm getting to speak to a clarinetist tonight, not because I play the clarinet. I categorically can't, but because one very loyal viewer always sends me lovely feedback about the guests after the sessions, and the clarinet is her instrument. So I know she's going to be hanging on to every word from Andrew. So a big shout out to Jane, and no pressure, Andrew. Now, when I find out who our next guest will be, I do that typical thing of Googling them. And when I Googled Andrew, it made me feel quite nervous. His musical heritage being son of the late Sir Neville Marriner, a lauded performer and a professor at 2 music colleges, I think I shrank a little. But then when we spoke on the phone and he told me he'd been watching my previous webinars, our mutual stalking proved quite amusing and made me feel very at ease. He's clearly got a great sense of humour and a passion for teaching. So I'm sure I will enjoy this conversation just as much as you will. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to present Andrew.
Let me unmute and say good evening to everybody. Thank you, Jean, for that very kind introduction. I was blushing.
Were you?
Yeah, either that or it's hot in the kitchen because I've been relegated to the kitchen because everybody else in the house is working in the good rooms. So
well, we're all working at funny times, aren't we, these days? So
yeah.
Now, would you like to start off with a little toot?
Well, it's funny you should say that because I took a fair amount of persuading, as you know, because of course during lockdown I've been doing all my teaching online and I've virtually not touched the instrument. So you've given me an opportunity to reacquaint myself with an old friend, which is the instrument I've been using since 1986.
Gosh.
Well, we'll see if anything comes out, but it's nothing too demanding, but I'll just see if we can find.
Yep. Well, I'm going to put you on spotlight so no one can see me for a minute. Okay.
And that was a strange little piece that I stole. It's quite a curiosity because it's actually a traditional piece written by Jacques de Gallo, a barely known composer, and obviously from a much earlier time. But the reason I love it is because it reappears in Respighi in the Birds, which is wonderfully orchestrated for full orchestra, and the oboe gets the tune.
Oh.
And I've always resented that. And Eugene, of course, will have recognised it instantly as part of the oboe repertoire. But actually, the Birds from Respighi isn't played. You know, the Pines of Rome, the Fountains of Rome are played a lot by the orchestras, but the Birds is quite a curiosity in itself. But I've always been jealous of the oboe for having that tune, and so I nicked it. And that's what you got this evening.
Oh, well, it sounds beautiful. It was beautiful phrasing. Yeah, lovely. Well, control. See, it's nice that you can go time without playing, and you still, you don't lose it, do you?
Well, it is getting more difficult, I get to tell you.
Yeah, well, I think everything's getting more difficult. Okay, right. Well, thank you. I'm really delighted that you did that. It was so special. So, plan for tonight. Give some structure to our conversation. And also I'm going to go through some questions by subject area, as you're aware. So I'm going to file them roughly so everybody else knows as well. Andrew, the kind of early years, professional years. So then technique questions, product specific questions like instruments and reeds and things like that. Some teacher perspectives, and then some other random ones that I couldn't work out where to file at the end. And so a reminder to everyone, you're still very welcome to ask questions throughout the session, and I'll probably get to these at the end. So right then, I'm going to kick off with my question first. Very often we get asked, do you come from a musical family? And obviously you do. So I'm curious, just why and how did you begin playing? Why was the clarinet as opposed to perhaps the violin? And was it your first instrument? Others, early? Yes. Over to you.
Easy question. Firstly, can I just say, is the speaking volume about right now?
Yes, perfect. I can hear you.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I play the clarinet is because my father was a violinist before he became a conductor. He was actually a fantastic violinist.
Yeah,
but as he said, he wanted to be high fits, and that job was filled. But he was a terrific violinist, and the thought, I suppose, of having another one scraping away, a sort of 5 or 6 year old scraping away in the house, was more than he could bear. So he consulted with friends and said, what is the least offensive instrument to have around the house with a beginner? And whether rightly or wrongly, he was told it was the clarinet. So the clarinet it was. It wasn't, in fact, just as simple as that, because they took a look at my chops and thought, well, yeah, that's not going to be a trumpet player. But maybe the clarinet would fit. So that was it, really. There was no great passion on my part or anything. I just got handed this thing, and that was it.
And what age was that, sorry, did you say?
Well, I started piano age 5, and then at 7, I went to choir school, and that was, I was a professional musician age 7. I did my first recording session in 1962, which...
And that was with the Miserere, I can never say it.
The Miserere Allegri. Yeah. That extraordinary recording of Roy Goodman's solo voice that is still in the catalogue under legendary performances. Yeah, and little angelic choir boy floats up to a top C, which is incredibly high.
Yeah, really high.
It's fantastically potent. And so, we were performing every day in chapel. Effectively, we were professional musicians age 7. And we had to learn an instrument, and so the clarinet it was.
So did you like playing the clarinet at first? Did it take some persuasion?
No, it didn't actually, partly because it took all the heat off my piano playing, which was already abysmal, and never got better, much to my regret, because of course you're a much better musician if you can do all that sort of stuff that's required for piano. And so yeah, I bitterly regret not advancing on the piano, but the clarinet took the heat off, and I think they were right. You can make a pretty decent noise quite early on.
So, because I think there was one of the questions was, would you say that the clarinet is one of the hardest instruments to learn from scratch? Then perhaps you might say that it's not the hardest instrument to
Absolutely
learn from
not.
scratch.
No,
No.
no, sorry to disappoint. Yes.
Would you agree? No, I would not.
No, absolutely not. No, I think the clarinet is a glorified recorder, and we all make too much fuss about it. But I do think all these instruments to play to a very high standard, I think, are tricky, but not necessarily for the reasons that the obvious reasons that you would think. I think that you know, wind instruments, blowing down the wind instrument, getting the manual dexterity to be a virtuoso is challenging, and people do it to a greater or lesser extent. But I think the real challenge comes when you start getting more discerning as a musician in terms of the sort of sound and the sort of expression that you're trying to feed into this reluctant instrument.
Definitely. So what was it like in your house? What was it like when you were a child? I mean, you know, I understand that were your parents quite friendly with Sir David Attenborough as well?
How did you get that one?
Well,
that's
I told you, I'm an extreme stalker, Andrew. I do my research. This is journalism days.
There is a wonderful story of when Dad was still in the LSO, and they were going on I think it was a world tour, and they were setting off, and David was making a documentary. He'd got permission to get a budget to go make a documentary about an orchestra on tour. And when he got on the aeroplane at Heathrow, or London Airport as it was then, they said, "Oh, you want to go to the back? That's where the poker school is." And there was Dad and a couple of mates playing cards already at the back, and they just hit it off straight away and remained firm friends for the next 50, 60 years.
Yeah, great. So good time. So familiar.
But I mean, the whole thing at home was an extraordinary story of good fortune, really, because I would sit outside the music room, because the Academy of St Martin's was a very small chamber orchestra to start with. So they fitted in the front room. All the furniture came out, and 10 of them would crowd into my dad's living room, and they'd work through lots of repertoire. So I would sit on the stairs, having helped shift the furniture, or at least tried to help. And I'd sit on the stairs listening. So I got to know all that repertoire very early on.
Yeah. Wow.
So that combined with a choral tradition, you know, there's no excuse really for me not to have done something.
So you just felt that it was all meant to be, that going to music, definitely.
I think, there wasn't really an alternative. Cricket crossed my mind, and I would have loved to have been a professional cricketer, but obviously the career is not as long lasting. And it can be a little bit dampening of the spirit if the person next to you in the warm-up nets was David Gower, future captain of England. It did make you feel that you weren't really cutting it, because we weren't to know he was going to be the captain of England. But I still love my cricket, and I would have loved to have been a cricketer.
Interesting.
There are certain things that also compute with cricket. The only thing that I'm jealous of cricketers is that when they're out straight away, if you just go in, miss the ball or nick it to the slips or something, you can leave the field within 3 minutes and go home for a bit, and you're done. When you do that in the orchestra, if you nick one to the slips in the overture, you've still got a very long night ahead of you, and you have to stay at the wicket.
Oh, fantastic. So, well, we should talk about that. So your fantastic career, you know, with the LSO and St Martin in the Fields, that was you were there some time. We had a very specific question about the warm up with the LSO. I don't know if you noticed that question, that they warmed up for at least 15 minutes before a concert starts, whereas most amateurs process on together. Is that usual?
Well, it's funny that you should say that, because in American orchestras, they shambles on and practice all the difficult bits up to half an hour before the beginning of the concert, and you never quite know when they've started. In the LSO, we've had various attempts at getting people to line up at the side of the platform and march on in good order and look really smart and determined about it. But there's always somebody who wants to go on and try their reed, or, you know, just have a little look at the last passage or whatever. So I can't remember really. I would wander on about 1:45, have a little look, check the reed, make sure everything was okay, bang it back on the peg, and walk off the platform again.
Yeah.
And then not come on until the very last minute, which alarmed some. But I think it looks good when an orchestra marches on together.
Yeah.
I don't like hearing half the concert practiced by somebody, particularly if it doesn't go very well, on stage.
I'm like,
On stage
I've got to
before
sit
they
through
have to
this.
do it. You're sitting there waiting for that moment to come and thinking, no, you're not going to make it, are you? But yeah, so I think I mean, if there was a question in there about whether I think it's a good idea or a bad idea, I think the LSO has tried very hard to get away from that, shambling on the platform and having a stab at what's coming up. But I quite like just getting everything sorted and then putting it down and then going off, have a cup of tea or something. Yeah.
So have you got any favourite memories during those times? You've played with some fantastic people. We noticed some. I mean, I was wondering, you know, what it was like with Alfred Brendel, for instance. But I mean, you might have got some even bigger, you know, favourite memories of venues and people that you've played with at the time. So if you'd like to share any memories, we'll be all ears.
Well, I mean, okay, playing with Brendel, absolutely extraordinary. I once did Shepherd on the Rock with him. Do you know Shepherd on the Rock? Soprano, clarinet, and
I should look it
piano. Fabulous Schubert song, but with obbligato clarinet. Okay. Did that rather lonely feeling on the stage of the festival hall. Just 3 players. But Alfred Brendel was the most wonderful, delicate pianist. My only gripe with him was that whenever we got to Vienna, he'd choose the piano that was the most sparkling and would make the most delicate and bright sound. But it was always the sharpest. And in Vienna, of course, they play at about 4 A equals 4/4/4 to start with. So if the pianist then chooses a piano that is good, you find yourself sort of sawing bits off the instrument to try and make the pitch. So whenever I had piano concertos abroad, I'd always take short barrels to be able to try and at least raise the pitch.
Interesting.
But playing with him was amazing. But I was so lucky with my chief conductors. I started with Claudio Abbado. In fact, I started with Sergio Celibidache, who was one of my great heroes. Who you may have heard of, but really, I mean, he was going to be head of the Berlin Phil before Herbert von Karajan, but it didn't happen. So Celibidache, Abbado was my first boss, and he got me basically into the orchestra because he liked what I gave him for the playing. I was lucky that it was just about when the great Jack Brymer was retiring. And so I got to go on the 1983 World Tour, 5 weeks around the globe in our own aeroplane. Wonderful.
Oh, lovely.
So exciting for, some of the first work I did. And that was pretty special. And Abbado took a liking to my playing. And so as the tour progressed, I got to do more and more. And that really set me up for the job. So I have a lot to thank him for.
Yeah.
And Michael Tilson Thomas, of course, was a wonderful chief conductor of the LSO. Fantastic pianist, jazz. He plays Gershwin. He conducts Mahler and Richard Strauss, and all very flamboyant. And a great influence on rather a hard-bitten orchestra that I joined. It was very civilizing influence. It was also an orchestra that, when I joined, had very few women in it. And Michael was instrumental in broadening out the audition process to make it fairer.
Yeah.
So he was a great influence on the orchestra, followed by Colin Davis, who I adored. Berlioz, Sibelius, Mozart, everything he touched was fabulous. It was a joy to go into work. Of course, Rostropovich was learning how to conduct at that time.
Sure.
Terribly exciting. Yeah, I mean, just wonderful, wonderful. And it went on for another 25 years after that. So I was lucky.
And so you retired in 2019.
Was that last year? Yes, it was, wasn't it?
I know. What year is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And you had a nice retirement party, I understand.
It was great. It was very, very nice. And somewhere online, somebody's posted a Facebook, not a Facebook, a YouTube clip of the farewell speech that Simon gave me.
Gosh.
And because Simon Rattle and I grew up together in the National Youth Orchestra, so it was a very happy thing that he was my last music director at the LSO. And I go off and play chamber music tours with him still. He plays the piano wonderfully, and his wife sings. And we have this little group with the concertmaster of the Berlin Phil and people like that. It's just about 7 of us, and we trot around having a very nice time and playing and singing great music. That
sounds fantastic. I would love to be a fly on the wall in one of your rehearsals. That would be very fun. Well, we'll move on. We'll talk about a few more practical things now, I think. But obviously, anybody else still ask questions that if you want us to go back over any areas. So in terms of performance, and you've had lots of performance experience, Patricia wanted to know how to overcome nerves. And Julie had a similar one. I think she's from a jazz band. So she's wanting, have you ever gone totally blank during a performance and had to improvise your way out? I mean, I suppose there's a difference between doing it jazzy and, jazzing your way out, or, sidestepping classically out of a nervous situation.
I think we've got to split up the two elements that we're talking about. One is nerves, and the other is drying or blanking or just terrible memory lapse. And I think as far as memory lapses go, I think the worst thing for me is when you get it wrong, when you've got the music in front of you and you still don't know where you are. That can happen when you get a bit too relaxed, and normally with familiar music, you know where on the page you are. So if something goes wrong and you have to refocus, you know where to find it again. When you're playing from memory, then there are places in the Mozart concerto that everybody, funnily enough, still finds awkward. You have that momentary indecision, and then you're absolutely in deep and very difficult to dig your way out. And of course in Mozart there's nowhere to hide, so that is just what seems like half an hour of agonizing nothingness is probably about a second at worst of forgetting, and then you pick up and come in. Very occasionally, if you didn't come in the orchestra, I do remember a wonderful performance of Erwartung with Pierre Boulez conducting and Jesse Norman singing. And Boulez in the rehearsal said, "Now, Andrew, it is very important that you give this A flat a little extra sound, because this is Miss Norman's note to begin the whole piece." Right. And I remember a massive occasion of live television and everything, and the piece starts and it gets to that moment where she's just about to come in, and I think, some idiot's forgotten to play here. That would be me then, would it? And there was a certain frisson at the interval when it was realized the culprit was found. And for the second performance, I was a little more attentive. Yeah. Oh. So yeah, those moments are pretty ghastly. But it is always that feeling of some fool's. Oh, that's me. Yeah. Yep. I'm sure everybody. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I was just switching to the other part of the question, which is what to do about nerves. And I think I was just very, very lucky. I think that I was so happy to be there that the only thing you don't want to do is let your colleagues down. I think once you realize two things is you don't want to let your colleagues down, but playing an instrument generally doesn't cause severe injury, and it's nothing about a performance of music is life-threatening. So if you do mess up, you're not the only person ever to have done so, and you will probably have time to redeem yourself sometime. And it does take the pressure off. People put themselves under the most extreme pressure. And of course, you don't want to get blasé about it. And of course, I had moments of sheer terror, which I can remember. But yeah, I mean, I remember playing Berlioz's, there's a wonderful 8-minute solo lament for clarinet in the Trojans. Any clarinet player should have a look at that, because it is one of the most moving passages ever written for the clarinet. In many ways, much more emotionally fraught than even sort of Rack 2 or Mandarin or any of those sort of big solos. And this sort of 8-minute funeral pantomime is the most glorious moment, but everything goes hush. And you've got a massive Berlioz audience on stage and an enormous chorus, and they just sit in the background, and every 8 bars when you played something, they go, oh. I mean, literally in the score, the chorus moans. And so this funeral scene, but I remember doing it at the Albert Hall for the Proms, and it, that's it. You're on your own.
Yeah.
And there is a moment where you suddenly think, do I really? And then you start and you're fine.
Yeah.
And then you're in it. And I think that as long as you use your nous about how to defeat what nerves does to the provision of air, then this is probably what your listeners are looking for, is how to recover from that flutter. And that's a purely physical technique to increase the support of air and to blow faster and more intense air through the instrument that will stop the fluttering.
Yeah.
So once you get a bit of fuel injection into the air column, then that stops you betraying your nerves, and so you become less nervous.
That's good advice.
Helps a
Yeah,
bit,
that's fantastic. Really good advice. So with other sort of playing tips then, we've had quite a few questions about how to play high notes well and difficult playing high notes in tune too. So if you've got any other suggestions that could help, and if you feel free, if you want to demonstrate anything as well, obviously, go ahead.
Well, in a funny way, I've always been quite a lazy player, but sometimes it's been to my advantage, because I think people do too much. I think, and one of your questions I saw later was to do with somebody who is torn between an R13 and a 1010 clarinet. The difference being in the size of the bore. But I play on buffet festivals, as it happens, which are a relatively straight bore, nothing too big, like an old 1010. And I think that a lot of our inherited technical ideas come from the wide bore instruments, where you had to nurture every tone, so that as you went through the instrument, each note had its own characteristic, sort of. Let me think of an obvious passage. I know, Fingal's Cave. so all those exaggerated notes that I'm playing were actually the product of the way the ball was arranged on the 10-10 instrument. The B natural. That note had such a bloom on it that everybody stopped to admire from the top of the hill and forgot to get going. And a lot of interpretations of that time reflect that. I think with French narrower bore instruments, closer to the German, really sort of the pipey instruments, you find that you don't need to work so hard to get from note to note. So you don't need to create it's the sound world as a result of the instrument's requirements. You create a sound world as to satisfy the musical requirements. And that in turn gives you a much greater evenness across the registers. And that includes the upper register. So instead of having to chew each different note to try and make it work, I just stick it in my face. So cushion, seal, blow. I'm not actually changing anything when I play. And I think that probably what some of the questions that I saw written down that you kindly forwarded were really leading to was, what do you do to coax those notes out of the instrument? And the answer for me is nothing.
Do nothing. Yeah.
Because if the support of the instrument, which is so crucial and which is my mantra, is sufficient. In fact, it has to be uber sufficient. It has to be running at the famous 120%, whatever that happens to be. But if you have, because getting over the break that people are talking about is to do with the different resistances of these notes. If you've got a throat G, then there's nothing there, is there? It just falls out of the instrument. If you've then got to go up and across to the B natural, as we say, the first note across the break, needs much more. Is much more resistant. So you always end up going like that. And if to start with, you've offered the correct amount of diaphragmatic support with a really positive and fast column of air, then you minimize that so that the break ceases to exist. Now that's really useful in things like Brahms, where you have lots of those long Bs. If you get the air column right, you can minimize the difference in the quality of the sound. So that evens it out. So it makes a much smoother phrase, or even Brahms 4. If you weren't evening it out, it would be. So that you've got all sorts of different resistances that you're not able to smooth out. And this way, if you're getting the support right, then as you go up the instrument, just don't change anything.
Okay.
And make sure that you keep the vowel the same. You can see that none of my chins moved.
Nothing's no.
It just all stayed in exactly the same place.
Fantastic. I think Jess says that she loves that explanation. I find the ease with which French ball clarinets play allow you to be more musical, as you don't have to work so hard to make it sound easy. If that makes sense at all. So you're doing all the right things for Jess. She says, brilliant.
Great.
Right. Okay. So, well, let's. Oh, I've got some other questions. Oh, thanks for the shout out. Okay. Right. Let's move on to some other questions then. So we've kind of covered the break. I think we've covered high notes, low notes. Breathing. Do we feel like we've covered breathing? Controlling breathing? Yes, I think we have.
I could bore you for hours about breathing.
Well, I mean, top tip for a younger, less experienced player to think about the tone quality. I mean, just playing slowly. You know, I think some children just want to play quick. Is it?
Yeah. I think in order to appreciate the sound you're making, you need to really stop and think, if I was singing that phrase, would I really play it like that? I think if you vocalize everything, because it's very easy on the clarinet just to punch the notes out. But in real life, some of the sounds on the clarinet can be disappointing. And if you were to sing it, you might do it better. You might address it better. And then when you return to the clarinet, it is, for me, it's singing without revealing that, that awful thing where you're the, well, it doesn't happen to me because I don't sing at weddings or funerals. But if you can suddenly you hear your own voice when you're singing in church or something, and you think, good God, who's making that terrible record? Oh, that would be, yeah.
That's me.
Then you would immediately modify the sound that you make to make it more attractive. Yeah. And I think that's what we have to do on the clarinet is think, if that was my voice coming through, then I'd like it to sound a bit more like that. And the way to practice that is obviously with slow note practice.
And perhaps recording yourself as well, would that be helpful?
Yeah, I suppose it would. I mean, particularly now, I think doing a lot of online stuff, it is possible to pick out sound quality. I mean, certainly of the extremes it is, but it's also possible online to pick out quite a lot of subtlety in terms of tonal production.
So is there any particular repertoire you might recommend then to work on the tone? Any exercise books? You've got a collection of music as well. That's more repertoire rather than exercises, there isn't it really?
Yeah, I mean that first piece that I played was from that book, and basically I've just stolen all good tunes. There's no coincidence that a lot of them are vocal. I've chosen Schubert songs. I've chosen Mozart arias. I'll put a link.
I'm going to put a link into the chat so everybody can see what this publication is, so that if they feel inspired, that they can look it up. So,
one of the good things about that is the Rachmaninoff, that everybody should know the solo from the slow movement of Rach 2, Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony, which is, Brief Encounter, all that, or is actually Brief Encounter is the second piano concerto, isn't it? But Rachmaninoff, anyway. And what I've done is put a B-flat clarinet version, so the piano accompaniment is for B-flat clarinet, so those people who don't have an A clarinet also get a crack at it. But I think that for tonal improvement, that's really the area that I'm sort of the most interested in. For those who are the nerds who really want to nail it, I could also say that my dear colleague and co-student, Rainer Wähler, has written a book that is published by Schotz. It's actually 3 volumes, and the first volume is about sound and production, and it is wonderful. It's effectively our teacher, that was a man called Hans Deinzer, who taught Sabine Meyer and taught Martin Frost, so no slouch. And Sabine's husband, Rainer, was also in that class with me. And he's written down this amazing technique for improving sound.
Is it very thick? It's not like sort of Hanon or Czerny or anything like that? from a piano point of view?
It's a decent size. It's very thorough. It's
Yeah,
very
okay.
thorough.
Oh, yeah, it's a bit
And volume
like
2
that.
is for the finger work, and that's very thorough. And
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I played oboe back in the days, and it was Hinky and then Furling, and that was it, and they were pretty galling. I was just thinking about what you said about some nice pieces with lovely solos. I remember really like there's a Bartók piano concerto, and I think the second movement is Adagio Religioso, and there's a beautiful oboe line, which I always thought, oh, I'd like to play that. But I also like to play the piano as well. I'd like to do both things. That would be my dream thing to play.
Well, now everybody's doing it online, so you can overdub yourself and you can do that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to have to do a bit of practice as we got. haven't played the oboe for some time, so I have to do a bit of technique work.
Just watch the copyright with Bartók. That's the only thing.
Oh, okay, right, noted. Okay, so technique then. Let's move on. What's your routine to continue to build on technique between performances when you have to learn repertoire quickly? So how do you learn things quickly?
On the hoof, I suppose. I mean, we were playing probably 9 hours a day when we were in London with the LSO or as freelance or whatever. So that doesn't leave much time when you've factored in the transport to get between studios or rehearsals to do much. So you do develop a very, very quick method of sorting out the difficult stuff. You'd get there, you'd park, I mean, this is assuming that it's studio work where the ink wasn't yet dry. So you not like an orchestral library where you can get the stuff out in advance. If it's new stuff and you don't get a chance to keep it in the case for a couple of days before, then you once you've found a parking space, you'd go into the studio and just look at the dots, see what was there. Probably look over the first oboe part as well, just to see how much you were exposed and compared to other people, or whether a lot of it was going to be tutti. What I would do would be, and this is again, it's slightly a technical approach, but I would check to see what instrument it was written on and what key it was in, because I always felt that I stood a better chance if a piece was in B major on the B flat clarinet. So A major concert, very common key that turns up, but for the clarinet, suddenly you're in B major, which is not only awkward for the fingers, but it's actually, it doesn't acoustically, it's not a great key on the clarinet. Put it on the A clarinet, we're in C major. Easy. And acoustically in on C major on the clarinet is a very smooth operation. So I would always just keep an eye open for options to do that. And in the classical repertoire, there are various things that I used to play on the wrong clarinet, whether it was Peter and the Wolf, which is much easier on the B flat clarinet, the crucial solo, the Strauss oboe concerto, the clarinet orchestral part is in E major on the B flat clarinet, so you just go up to F major. There were things, what was that piece? Cigane by Ravel. Ridiculous B major solo. Stick it on the A clarinet, C major, bang, easy. It goes. And in B major, you sort of, you can, all the keys sort of clanking away. C major, very smooth. Yeah. So
I wonder
a lot of cheating.
Well, but then, it sounds like you get away with it, and it sounds beautiful, so why not? Absolutely. Like easy. Jerry Wiggins had asked whether do you think the B flat clarinet is more responsive to certain keys? So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And it's interesting what sometimes that effect that has on composers. Intonation can be really tricky in certain keys with certain composers. I always find myself sharp in Schubert. Berlioz you're always in a tangle with the front row woodwind,
Sure.
flute, oboe, very awkward intonation. So certain composers tricky.
Mm. So let's talk about your setup, because obviously you're making adjustments then. So you mentioned the clarinets that you play. Perhaps we could talk about mouthpieces and reeds and things, and yeah, explain how you've come to the choices of your setup, because so you're very discerning.
I have been playing since 1986 almost exclusively on a buffet festival. A dear friend, it now gets repaired by Sato-san in Tokyo, because most people in the UK look at it and go, oh, please, Andrew, don't do that to me. But you might see it's a bit of a heap now. What you also might see is that sneaky little key there. Anybody who's seen a German clarinet will know that this G-sharp key, which sometimes when you have a G-sharp trill, is quite tricky.
Yeah.
If you just go with your index finger of the right hand, it does make life a lot simpler. And I thought, even when I was a student in Germany, if they're allowed one, why shouldn't I? So I had that put on, and it's traveled with me all the time for the last 50 years. So that's about the fourth lot of key work on this particular instrument.
Wow.
But I think when you grow to love an instrument, then this barrel's been with me. This is a wonderful buffet. I think it's an R13 barrel, even though I'm on a festival. And it's a 66, and that's been on every instrument I've ever had from buffet. Mouthpiece is made by a lovely, lovely man who I'm still very much, in fact, we emailed each other yesterday, although I haven't had a mouthpiece from him for some years. And in fact, he stopped making them. And that's Mike Lomax in the States. But I got it. I just walked through the door in Haworth, and he was there. And he was making a mouthpiece for somebody and fiddling with it.
Yeah.
And we got chatting, and I said, oh, my B45 is very worn now. I've been playing it for years. And he said, oh, well, try this. And he gave it a couple of tweaks, and I said, well, yeah, that sounds like my old mouthpiece, but sort of
better.
Feels new. Great.
Yeah.
And I never took it off. I haven't taken it off since. And that's 12, 15 years.
Gosh.
Then ligatures. I shouldn't be saying this on somebody's broadcast where you're trying to sell there's lots of different equipment, but I'm very unadventurous with ligatures, because I feel that a standard band of leather, so without any metal touching the reed or the mouthpiece, is my preferred case.
So like a Rovner kind of one.
Yeah.
Well, we sell lots of them. Yep. Yes.
No, Rovners. Do you sell Jubilees? Is there something called a Jubilee?
I'll have to double check. Yeah, very familiar with them.
The Rovner now, some of them are quite shiny, plasticky thing. I like the cloth one, which is great. And that's about it. Oh, I suppose we never got around to talking about reeds, did we?
Oh yes, yeah. Somebody wants to know. Clive wants to know what your thoughts are on synthetic reeds. And actually, Suzanne asked that. What your thoughts on them are as well. And Heather Bird wants to know, what strength do you normally use, and does it change according to what genre, type of music you're playing, and why? So yeah, all your innermost thoughts about reeds.
I play on 3.5 D'Addario classic, on reserves, and also 3.5 evolutions. And it just depends. I like both of those. That took over from a man called Rudolf Flaumer, who used to make my reeds. He was a single manufacturer in Germany. and I used his reeds from student days. But when he retired, I moved to D'Addario in 2013. I've barely tried synthetic reeds, and I know that the guys, my colleagues in Vienna and in Berlin, are all playing concerts on them some of the time.
Really?
But they also return to wood reeds when things are favourable, shall we say? You know, we've all spent a lot of time going, oh my goodness, this isn't working, and the atmosphere and whatever. Personally, I suppose the only time you have the reed of your dreams is when you don't need it. So if you're playing the Fauré Requiem next weekend, you'll have the best reed that you've ever had. If you've got the Mozart Concerto next week, you're struggling to find the right one. But you have to persevere, and also do that trick where you say, I've got 3 reeds here, I want you to tell me which one is the best. And most of the time people not only won't be interested, but they won't be able to tell the difference, because it's all to do with how you're blowing. And of course you can get into trouble by making the wrong selection. But mostly, even if one side of a reed is too hard and the other is too soft, then if you're playing in a Brahms sonata or something, you use the soft side, and then the heavy side, and you can actually use it to your advantage in a reed that's not balanced.
So might you make some adjustments to a reed if it wasn't deliberately, if it wasn't like that, you might then manufacture that yourself? Do you?
I'm not sure I'd ever go out of my way to make a reed uneven, but but I take your point. Yes, you could very easily do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have played concerts on half a reed if I haven't found one that responds all the way.
Okay, so Paul wants to know, so how do you determine a good mouthpiece?
I'm afraid it's real suck it and see, isn't it, with mouthpieces? There are some wonderful mouthpiece experts around, and I'm certainly not one of them. And as you can tell, once I found something that works, I tend to stick with it. What I would counsel against is going too far off the track. If you get the mouthpiece of your dreams from a single manufacturer in at the foot of the Andes, and he only makes 3 a year, then if your mouthpiece suffers a misfortune, whether it breaks or whatever happens, or you lose it, worse still, then you're going to have to travel to the foot of the Andes to find another one if he's still making. So I would stick middle of the road. Don't blame too much on the mouthpiece. Figure out a way of blowing that makes a standard piece of equipment really hum.
Richard had an interesting question. Do you think you can tell what a clarinet is made from solely by the sound? Do you feel like that you can do that when obviously you do a lot of teaching now, so do you hear all
people
sorts?
Occasionally play tricks on me, like with reeds. One people, when I went droning on, say, don't you bring plastic reeds into my club, and they sneak one in the next week, and I didn't clock it for about 10 minutes, and they say, I was wondering when you were going to find me out. Normally I think it's really difficult, because I could tell if Tony Pay, for instance, I could tell if Anthony Pay, this wonderful clarinetist, if he was playing, but he could be playing on a student instrument, high-end instrument, or a watering can. He would still sound magnificent. And I think this applies to a lot of the top players, that although they'll have their personal preference, they can make anything sound the way they play. But the other way round, the difference between a composite clarinet, say, or a plastic clarinet, whatever. I think yes. I think there is a mellowness to a high-end piece of wood that it's very difficult to achieve on a less ambitious instrument.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's not designed to do that
straight away.
Yeah.
And generally, I wouldn't blame it on the instrument. I'd blame it on the player.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk a bit more about your sort of teaching that you're doing now. So you're teaching at the Guildhall and at the Royal Academy. What is it you love about teaching now?
Well, hearing other people playing it better than I can is already a good start. And I've had some wonderful pupils. I've actually, I've only been teaching at the Guildhall which is sort of one-on-one, a proper class, for about 7 or 8 years. I've been doing a masterclass every term at the Royal Academy of Music for 40 years, which seems like an awful long time. And the teaching that I really am into at the moment, or when life resumes, is going to places like Czechoslovakia and hearing the young players there. And there's some fantastic playing in Czechoslovakia, in Bulgaria, in Budapest, and then I go a lot to Italy, to Spain, around Europe, and a lot to the States, actually. I went over, some of your listeners will know Yehuda Gilad, who is the most phenomenal teacher. He teaches at the Colburn School in the West Coast. And I went over there to teach with Yehuda for a bit. And just to hear his class and hear his players and often, a lot of these people are really generous, these teachers, because they want somebody else to come in, and you either say something preposterous that they can't stand, but they're too polite to tell you, but with luck they'll tell their players to forget it next week, or they say at the end of the class, I've been telling them that for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
You come in, tell them, and now they do it.
Oh, they hang on every word.
So, so it's very, very familiar territory for everybody. But I do adore, firstly, working with my students at the London conservatoires, but also this sort of slightly roving ambassador stuff where I toddle in and don't have to work too hard, but I can identify, I think, areas where I could help.
So young children starting off, perhaps you're kind of more at the top end of ones then, maybe.
Certainly that. I just wouldn't be very good at that bit.
No.
But I do know a lot of people who are.
Yeah.
And thank goodness for them, because without it, things just don't progress.
Okay. So right. Oh, right. We've got some other questions that have come in as well. Parent of a beginner child, Liz Garner, wants to know, why is the clarinet the best instrument?
I think we covered that one.
Okay.
The best instrument, because it makes the least filthy sound to start with.
Yeah.
So you may not, as a parent, you may not necessarily believe that yet.
Yeah. Is there anything you regret about your career path, or that you would have done that would do differently? This is from Claire.
Wonderful question. And I cannot think of anything. I've just been handed everything on a plate, and I've had the most phenomenal time, and I played the most fantastic music with the best artists and amongst the best colleagues. So I think
I don't think you should have regrets anyway. What's the point? You just kind of keep on moving forward. It won't change, will it? So Joanna and Rachel both want pieces that you would never tire of playing or hearing, or pieces that you could not live without.
In terms of playing, I think Bruckner symphonies I always used to adore playing in the orchestra. A whole load of the orchestral repertoire. I won't miss Mahler so much, but Bruckner I miss horribly. I love playing the chamber music. I love Mozart, Schubert, Brahms. I love great music.
Yeah.
I'm not so good. I'm not so patient with sort of so-so music. I'm a bit of a crashing snob when it comes to that.
Oh no, that's
but,
it's your choice. It's your opinion. That's fine. Yeah, totally. So when do you think it will be acceptable to play in ensembles again, both small and larger groups? I mean, yeah,
I'm
times.
very, very optimistic at the moment. I was speaking to a dear colleague today, and we had to cut short our conversation because the Musicians Union had sanctioned or had helped a studio set up a recording. They were doing the woodwind separately today. They had about 25 pages of documents about what they could and couldn't do, where they had to sit, how they came into the place, how they arrived, had to come by car, couldn't come by public transport. A whole load of interesting things that signaled some sort of progress. So professional music, to my mind, to my understanding, has started again. And I think small groups will be the first off the blocks. And I just pray that orchestras will find a way to get back into it.
Oh, you just reminded me of something there. You played in the recording for the Harry Potter, the music. Was it one of the first recordings for Harry Potter?
Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely hopeless in knowing what I've done.
No.
But I think that the LSO, and I definitely did, I think, 2 of the Harry Potter films, but don't ask me which ones.
No.
And I did 3 or 4 of Star Wars.
Yeah, amazing. Did you like the music? Do you remember the first time you played and thought, oh, this is all right, it's big.
The Star Wars stuff was fantastically difficult to play. Actually, because they're all rewrites. They're all you play it the first day and everybody goes, "This is fantastic, it's wonderful," and then you come back the second day and you do exactly that cue again, but it's completely different and it's got different licks and your sight reading and your hair's falling out because it's really virtuosic stuff.
Yeah.
But very exciting to do.
Oh yeah. Well,
the only sadness was that a lot of the boards weren't finished, so you just had pencil drawings of I don't know what those spaceships going across and people fighting each other and all that. And so I've never seen a Star Wars film.
I've never really
seen the finished
No. No. My son's just getting into them, although like the later or the earlier ones. Yeah, you could have been like waving your clarinet like a lightsaber.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, somebody said that they do now at the beginning of some of the videos. They do shots of the orchestral sessions and things like that.
Oh, so I think so too.
I think I'll be interested to look back on those.
And
see how we got on with it.
Yeah. Okay, so Sebastian wasn't know if you've got any advice for a prospective uni student hoping to pursue a career in classical music. So.
Yeah, I reckon if you're going to university, if you have ambitions to be an instrumentalist, then you should get a good balance between your academic work and cram in some really top class teaching, even if it means traveling from uni back to wherever your main teacher is on a regular basis. I think that it's perfectly possible to do it if you're that sort of if you have those ambitions. I think it's really great to go to university, although I flunked out of Oxford after 1 year to go off and learn to play the clarinet because I didn't get the mix right. But I think if you can do it, I've got several pupils who come down to see me from university, and they're all going to keep up with the standard that will allow them to do it as postgrads if that's what they choose to do.
And I think there was a question earlier on, I think I might have missed it initially. If you want to try and find a teacher who is going to push you and take you to that advanced level, how do you find those kind of teachers?
Wow, well that's difficult, and I noticed that because of course you're in the Taunton area, you're quite close to Wells, aren't you? And I was thinking that the clarinet teacher at Wells Cathedral School is Marie Lloyd, and she will have contacts, teaching contacts around that part of the world, and be better equipped, because what you need is somebody who's going to give you the boring bits, not the, oh well, look, do that exercise and play that exercise for me next week, but can you sort out firstly the breathing, then the embouchure, and then the rest is not too complicated. You just have to develop a method of practicing. But you've got to get the fundamentals right, otherwise you're going to be struggling. But there are so many talented players, and a lot of them are now turning into really good teachers.
I suppose we're fortunate that the whole situation has made that we can sort of contact each other by new means. So as long as teachers are willing and able, you can reach teachers all over. And we are fortunate. We have got some local music schools to us as well. There's the CYM, who have some fantastic teachers, and I think there's a North of them. So they are very good. But I suppose getting them certain.
Well, as you say, I mean, now that online teaching is taking off, you can learn with virtually anybody. It's just identifying who's going to be the right person for you.
Yeah.
And that is slightly tricky. And that's why I mentioned sort of key people around the place who work with developing players.
Yeah.
Either at the junior departments of the conservatories or in some of the better schools, so that you never be afraid to write to a player that you admire and say, I'm an amateur player, I live in such and such an area, do you know anybody in that area who you'd recommend as a teacher? And on the whole, then I'd phone up Marie, or I'd phone up Sarah, or whoever, and say, gosh, somebody in the Kent area, any ideas? And then the Bush telegraph gets going, and you do find really terrific teachers all over the place.
Fantastic. That's really good advice. Well, I've come to the rest of my other questions, but I've just noticed we've got a couple that have come in, so we'll just go through those, and I think then we'll be beginning to wrap up. So Clive said he wants some tips with playing very fast runs. His fingers get very tense. How to compromise between control of the correct notes and missing correct closure by sloppy, relaxed fingers.
Ooh, I think a lot of it's to do if you're getting a difficulty either too tense or too feeble. The first thing I would do would be to inspect the hand position. On the whole, and I'm sorry to say this about a lot of the clarinet manufacturers, are not necessarily, they can't put the thumb rest in the most convenient position for everybody. They have to have a standard position, and everybody's hands different shape, different size. So very often finger problems start with how you're holding the clarinet, what your hand or even arm position is, and the tension. Don't think that the tension is in the fingers. The tension starts anywhere in the body, and particularly in the shoulders, and that's going to creep down the arm. The wrist is critical, all that. So really analyze where any tension is coming from. And believe me, it's like when you go for a massage and you think, I just need my shoulders done.
Yeah.
And then they start working sort of right at your feet, and start from there. And you suddenly realize that it wasn't your shoulders that were a problem, it was everything else to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So really analyze, just drop your arms to the side and shake them out and find out where the tension is and take it from there.
Great stuff. Okay, right, final question. From Jane, a lovely Jane, because I have to have my legs elevated, I can only play the C clarinet. Breath support is more difficult, and I feel I get a harder tone. To a B flat. Any tips?
I didn't quite understand why the C clarinet was the only option. Was it to do with dangling from the chair, so not being firm?
Perhaps. I have to have my legs elevated.
Just read the front of that again.
Because I have to have my legs elevated, I can only play the C clarinet.
Legs elevated. Okay. Yeah, it still means as long as you're sitting down, you're going to get all the support. So that won't be an issue. What is an issue is that the C clarinet, if you think as you go higher up, the shorter the instrument, the smaller the instrument, the shriller they become. The E flat is potent. The C clarinet is bright. The B flat has pretty much everything, and the A is mellow, bit lumpier, bit more cumbersome to play.
Sure.
But so the C clarinet, yes, has a particular potency about it, and also the quality of some C clarinets is not necessarily because they're not so common.
Yeah,
you don't get so much emphasis.
Apparently the B flat is too long. So I think that's why I have to go short.
No, stick with the C clarinet. There's a lovely player called Anna Hashimoto who is an absolute expert on the C clarinet and makes it sing and really beautifully. And of course, you have the great advantage that you're playing at concert pitch.
Easy.
Everything you can play in the first violin part. So stick with the C clarinet, particularly if the B flat's uncomfortable, and you will carve out a niche in the musical world.
Fantastic. Great. Oh, so it's a noble one.
Oh yeah, lovely. Yes, I have one of those.
Yeah, I think it's up. Well, I think that's it. I think we've done all our questions. Your dog's started barking. Now you've got to be, don't want Benny going off, my little dog. So I'm going to start wrapping up then. I think that's all our questions done. So let me just thank you so much for giving us your time so generously. It's been really special, and we've obviously I'm not a clarinetist, but I've learned an awful lot, and it's great because I can hopefully pass on that knowledge to other customers. I can write blogs, I can do so much, and I'm sure everybody that's listened tonight will share what they've learned tonight as well with their friends and other clarinetists. So I'm sure I can speak on behalf of everyone that's joined tonight to offer say thank you. To everyone that's watched tonight, whether on Zoom or on Facebook, just another thank you. Your support really means that we can continue to hold these events. So, because there's no point me doing it on my own. So if you've enjoyed tonight, do let me know. I really do like it when I get emails saying that. I'm not after glory. It's just nice to know that you've enjoyed it and you've benefited from it. So do let me know. And join me on the next one, which will be in just 2 weeks today on July the 15th. Now this is huge for me. Drum roll. It's a sort of YouTube trombone sensation Christopher Bill. So now I know, Andrew, you've probably not heard of him, and that's absolutely fine. But this composer, arranger, and tromboning marvel has got a massive 263,000 followers on YouTube. And I'm excited and terrified in equal measure to meet him. So do keep a lookout for booking details. It's going to be I don't know what young people say, epic. And finally, just to say, most of you will have heard, sadly, about the burglaries John Packer last month, and you perhaps even saw me on the ITV West Country News. The whole company has been really touched by all your messages of support, and whilst we don't hold out much hope of getting our instruments back, I am happy to say that the break-in didn't affect our reopening. And in fact, we are going to be extending our opening hours from Monday coming, 9:30 till 5. So that's Monday, July the 6th. So if you want to visit, just visit our website in the next couple of days where there'll be all the details, or call us first to familiarize yourself with new protocols. But as a reminder, we do still have free deliveries to mainland UK. So if it's not essential, you don't actually have to visit us, okay? And I can't go without finally saying a big thank you to Buffet Crampon for sponsoring tonight's events. Without them, tonight just wouldn't have taken place. So they wouldn't have sort of matched us together. Andrew, it's been such a pleasure. I think the greatest compliment I can give you is that I wish I could play the clarinet.
Yes. Yeah, that's good to have won somebody over. Yeah.
Yep. And so that's it. Good night. Thank you, Andrew, again.
Thanks a lot.
Good night, and everyone stay safe and keep making lots of music. Doesn't matter how good it is, just keep going. Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.